fancy intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody in the Star Trek Fleet Command fandom. Today, I want to talk about some recent event changes that you'll be seeing this month and noticed this past weekend. And of course, I'm referring to the way that they are doing the recruitment events for Trip Tucker. Now, in the past, we've seen a variety of ways to go about, acquiring these officers. Solo leaderboards have become the norm, and we've accepted the fact that, when something says heroic in SLB, we just go ahead and understand that it's a spend event. But it keeps changing, and in some ways it can change that's maybe more advantageous for players who prefer to, sit and acquire a lot of resources and, maybe free to play it for a bit. And it can be more advantageous sometimes for players who just like to spend. And the general consensus historically has been that an SLB is going to be better for a pure spender, and an SMS, even a heroic, better for a pure free-to-play. So we're going to discuss that idea today. You'll also notice they did actually roll in a SMS and another heroic for actually a pretty bottlenecked currency. If you don't realize this yet, in Forbidden Tech, probably the most, I don't know how to even describe it, the biggest thing that you need is this right here. These are worth their weight in freaking gold. Yes, you want the protomatter, but the catalyst is such a problem. There's another event, and heroic is a spin with a small one. 288,000 points for me, level 49 is not really a lot to get some of that. And believe it or not, yeah, about 900 tier up catalyst is actually worth a lot to me. So as we're seeing them go through these different iterations, these events, I think it was good to talk about it and kind of have a discussion. So let's talk about Trip Tucker. Now, Trip Tucker was a heroic, but it was heroic with many, many milestones and had kind of an expensive early buy-in, as in your materials per shard much higher early on, and then it kind of flattens out. And then you see at the top, you can get a full unlock, but for me, that'd be 10.38 million points. Now, here's gonna be the logic on one side. The logic of why this is good is, for me as a player, we know that typically an SLB with an SMS, the SMS is not going to give you a full unlock. Usually it's going to give you about a half. And the SLB would be what you need to get the rest of it. In my brackets, on this account, level 49, 10.38 million is not going to get me the unlock of the officer. It's simply not going to. So you see that out of the 8 milestones, I went for 7. Let's discuss why. So we're looking at level 4 now, but I actually want to take you back a little bit. Let's take a look at this by level ranges and by brackets. So let's start with level 39. Now, this was John Connor. Thank you for helping putting this together for me. We were reviewing this information earlier today, and you'll see on the sides right here the actual cost with the milestones in terms of the points needed. And then, materials per shard basically is the idea on the far right, kind of using a mix of what we're doing to unlock, or your materials spent, rather, your points spent, rather, not pure materials. We didn't break it down into G3, G4, G5, just more of points per shard. So you can see with the Trip Tucker having 8 milestones, you get more efficient the deeper into it you go. Whereas here, just like in the top one, there's like an efficient kind of part in the middle, but it ends kind of abruptly, so you can't get as much in it. This is for Ops 39. So in terms of like your shard per material, it's cheaper to have it in the old style heroic that we had last month with the Enterprise E Riker. However, caveat to that is you don't get all the shards. As you can see, we only get 50 shards here for Enterprise E Riker, and there was an SLB attached, meaning that you then would have to go into competition with players of and around your level to then be able to fully unlock. And I do realize that there are going to be players, and I'm sure they're going to be in the comments, that say, well, hey, I just typically go for a certain number of milestones to simply unlock. And while that's true, I do want to point out again that anything that you see that has the word heroic on it, and generally anything you see that says SLB, is meant as a initial spend event. So when spenders look at this, they're wanting to go as high as possible. They want to get multiple tiers of an officer unlocked. And, with Trip Tucker, for many of you players, that can have value because of his below deck ability, giving you better loot to your Herodians and Species 8472 hostiles, regardless of how that doesn't have anything to do with what he did in the show. Here's Ops 39, and you can see that generally the advice that you might have heard from a lot of content creators for the big one up there, if you notice getting Trip, that Milestone 5 was actually more efficient than maxing out here with the Enterprise E Riker. So you had like a sweet spot in the middle, and what you ended up seeing a lot of us recommend as content creators is if you're going to do it, go in heavy because it gets more efficient the further in you go in terms of the materials you're spending, material points per shard. Let's move to Ops 49 and see if it stayed the same, which is what we just had in the background. And bam, there you go. You see at Milestone 5, again, big value in price to shard. Still a little bit less than what the max out is for Enterprise E Riker, but not the same as in the middle. But if you take a look at what you're getting by that point, that's giving you that's a big chunk, 32. Remember, we maxed out at 50 at the Enterprise E Riker one, but here we're getting 32 in that massive chunk. That's quite a bit. That's getting up pretty nice, getting up pretty beefy. So we like being able to obtain that many shards as we get up to 32 numbers, and 84,000 per, as you can see, gets more efficient, then it kicks back up just a little bit. And for the conversation, let's go ahead and drop in the level 59s, who probably are going to have the biggest opinion, I would say, because in the 50s right now, at the time of making this video, they have to compete with players in the 60s with any leaderboard. So this heroic SMS allowed them to get a full unlock without having to deal with leaderboards that go up to 40, 50, 60, 80 million points. They just needed to get 22.9 million points. So there are pros and cons to this style and this outlet. And I'm not necessarily trying to push anybody in one particular direction, but I would say that SLBs can be good. I think SMSs can be good. I love the idea of me as a player. And for those that don't know, my account that you'll see on the screen, it's a light spender account, battle pass, stuff like that. We're not out here buying every new prime that comes out. We're not out here buying all the things. So the ability for me to go toe to toe with somebody who might be a mid or a heavy spender is very difficult. So an SLB has always been something that I tend to, as a player, ignore. I don't generally participate in SLBs. What I would do is I would participate in the heroic SMS, and if the heroic happened to get me into scoring range of the SLB, then I accepted what scoring I would get. But I never really focused on it because it just didn't seem achievable for me. And while I will acknowledge that at various milestones, this heroic trip is actually more expensive, the trade-off is, in terms of price per shard, is I'm not having to deal with an SLB. So I'm more likely to guarantee my unlock if I do this push, and it's kind of easier to plan, assuming they stick with this style of strategy. Again, this is all based on where you're at, though. Like, your account could sit here and go, wow, I would spend way more here than what I would normally do with a standard SLB and heroic SMS. And we know why they do this. And if you don't know, well, I'll edify you real quick. The reason they go through all these different iterations for a long time, the sourcing of officers through these type of events was one of the big money makers in this game. And as time has gone on, I think that's dipped a little bit. And I don't even think, I know it's dipped a bit. But I also want to add that I think the dipping is not as much the officers as much as it is frustrations with things like communication, stability that we've had in recent months. And unhappy players are less likely to invest in your products. I would say that this style event is very interesting. I would love to see if it gets tweaked more and managed more. Pure numbers based, I'm going to assume that most people will look at these numbers that myself and John Connor ran and put together and say, we'd rather have the old style, even though it was less milestones, because it was cheaper. And I get that logic. I would also say, though, if you were one of those players out there who wants to get as deep into an officer as you can. Let me give an example. Let's ignore the fact that this is Enterprise E Riker and Trip Tucker. Let's for a moment imagine maybe an epic officer that many of you really would like to have. I mean, let's just in theory say it was 5 of 11. That's a very valuable officer. What if 5 of 11 had 3 weeks in a month that was the Trip Tucker milestone, which would equate to 300 shards? They're getting multiple tiers of an officer, whereas Enterprise E Riker, you basically would be planning for 2 weeks just to get an initial unlock, and then you run into the big problem of, well, is this tier 1 officer even any good? Remember, a lot of epics don't really get a big value boost until they get to tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, and that can be very difficult for those of you who are out there who are free to play or even light spenders. Getting multiple tiers of an officer can take years in Star Trek Fleet Command. So the big heroic having a little bit more cost and not having to contend with spenders could in theory give you more, where normally you weren't able to do that because of limited milestone structures like this. And then you might have the rebuttal, well then fine, make the Enterprise E Riker SMS and keep the same pricing model and just add more milestones. I think all these are good feedback. And at the end of the day, you know, players are going to want what's best for them. Scope is going to want what's best for them. And it's about finding what works for both sides. I personally will admit to you, not that I'm trying to, you know, push my bias. I prefer not having an SLB right now. It gets so tiring constantly having to go against people who will spend more money than I will. And I have no issue with people spending in the game. Please spend. You keep the game alive. Thank you for spending on Star Trek Fleet Command. But I can't keep up with everybody doing that. Like, I've got taxes, I've got 3 kids, my wife's having surgery. I can't do all that, right? So I like it, but at the same time, I acknowledge that as I look at these different bracket pools and as I look at the different, you know, where it gets efficient, there is value to going after up to milestone 5 and even milestone 7, but maybe not milestone 8. That last big chunk of millions that it would cost you, maybe not worth doing. And as you saw on mine, I actually went to milestone 7 and stopped. I scored 7.84 million out of, you know, 7.69. I did not push those last 2. And I think a big one again is going to be coming down to the players. If you are in the 50s, you know, because we have tens of thousands of players in the 50s, but only a couple thousand in the 60s. And those 60 players can make you feel real sour, like real quick, because 22 million points is no joke. But at the same time, I've seen the leaderboards up there and how they'll get into 50, 60, 70, 80 million. So let me know what you think. Feedback appreciated. I'm going to actually have a conversation with the Arc Runner about this month. I was talking to Stewie. He's already done the same thing. We're providing this type of feedback to make potential adjustments. So let me know what feedback you have in the comment section down below. I appreciate all y'all. I also want to share a fun little family photo. It actually snowed here in Louisiana. So we got like a good 1 inch of snow. Yay. The kids got to experience a little bit. So you get to experience a little bit of our family. Live long and plunder. Stay safe for their Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next Star Trek Fleet Command video. Thank you for the love and support and everything you do for me and mine. Y'all are incredible. And I will see y'all in the stream tonight. More Baldur's Gate. Anybody like Baldur's Gate? If you're playing Baldur's Gate, comment. I want to hear about it. I'm really enjoying that game.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.